Ladies.
Yes.
Right. Welcome back. Welcome back. Oh my gosh, you guys, we got another banger for you guys. We are so ecstatic for this episode. We have a special guest in the house. But before we even get there, let's just say, listen, it's been a long month and we are so happy that you guys have tuned in. You're continuing to support us. You're continuing to listen to our podcast. So welcome back to Chop It with R and K. Y'all already know it's your girl, Kamisha, and the hostess to the mostest, my girl, Roxanne. Roxanne, where you at?
There you are, Kamisha. Listen, I know we haven't been with each other physically filming or taping, but it sure still feels good to see you. The days are getting longer, so I know we're definitely going to be getting together to chop it up, right?
That's right. That's right. But that's okay, because we in spirit. We here in spirit. Listen, this episode is a banger. This is to celebrate and obviously conclude Women's History Month. We're so excited about this episode and our special guest. I'm going to let you do the introductions, but listen, to the audience, we want to hear from you. So after this episode, definitely follow us on social media, send us a message. We want this episode to be very interactive. Roxanne, it's all you, girl.
Yes. Well, I had the pleasure of speaking with this lady earlier this afternoon, Miss Dacia James Lewis, creative director, choreographer, speaker, and author. You know, she comes by way of the Big Apple and is here with us this evening talking about a topic that's, is very important, but yet it's not given the due diligence. And you don't necessarily get a lot of people who actually want to talk about it. So I am so excited that you decided, listen, this is a topic that needs attention, to come on with us this evening, Dacía, to talk about it. So listen, let's go ahead and chop it up, okay? So Dacía, give the audience I want to say your 1 minute bio, and then we'll go ahead and get into it.
Oh, 1 minute. Well, hey, ladies. First off, it's so exciting to be here with you guys, chopping it up.
Yes. Thank you. Welcome.
So much.
And so my name is Dacia James Lewis for all the wonderful listeners. I am a choreographer, professional dancer, what I like to call a multi-hyphenate these days, right? Because we're so gifted in different ways. But I'm originally from Galveston, Texas, and I moved to Los Angeles after graduating from college and pursued a career in the entertainment industry, where I've been blessed to really choreograph or dance for people like Jennifer Hudson, Jamie Foxx, Stevie Wonder. We just did Coming to America, was able to be a part of that, performing as a dancer. And then Genius Aretha comes out tonight, actually. So that's amazing. So I've really, truly been blessed to be on the stage and working with some amazing people. Oh my gosh. And Tracee Ellis Ross choreographed the American Music Awards for her about a year and a half ago. So it's just been an awesome career for me. God is so good. And I just feel blessed all in all. And I see God using my platform to kind of open up conversations like the ones we're about to have right now.
Nice. So let's just go ahead and dive right in, because I know this is a huge topic and we don't have a whole lot of time. And I know, we may need to do a part 2 depending on what we get this evening. But my question is, what made you decide, or how did you go about discovering, you guys, between your husband and you, there was some infertility issues?
Yeah, so no one really expects or thinks that they're going to have a problem having kids. It's all like the fairy tale we hear. First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes a baby in a baby carriage, right? And so that's really where we're like aiming and walking and assuming that it's just going to happen. And so I think the first year we were kind of like, yeah, not yet. We're chilling. And then year 2, we were like, well, maybe we should lay off the contraceptives and just kind of see, right? Okay. And then we kind of, let those go. And then it was like, why does not happen? And, because I think it was 1 year went by and we were like, that's interesting. And so I started looking up what infertility was. And so they literally call it infertility after 6 months of trying, right? Because you should be able to conceive within 6 months. And that's a kind of taboo thing in and of itself, because who wants to say I'm infertile after 6 months of trying, right? That's just a whole stigma in and of itself. And so I think when it was around year 4, I was like, well, let's just kind of go see, what they're going to say. And I was like, like, let me just go and get, fully checked out. Right. And I came back with a clean slate, like, oh, you're fine. You're fine. And so, okay, we'll just keep trying, you know?
So
And
when you came back with the clean slate, what exactly was your clean slate? What were the process? What were the procedures? What were some of the things that had to be done on your end?
right. So the first thing, okay, you're going to go to your gynecologist, and then she's going to check your hormones, your hormone levels, make sure that your hormones are correct. And after that, they're going to go and recommend an HSG testing, right? Where they go in and check the uterus, make sure there's no scar tissue, that the fluid can flow through well. And you can get that from maybe a STD back in the day. It's just like the secondary thing. Like after they check your hormones, the next thing you're going to do is an HSG testing, just to make sure that your fluids, I mean, you can the egg can travel through the fallopian tubes and everything. And so after that, they'll check your eggs with the sonogram and everything. So everything came back clear, so it's like 3 little steps you take before they're like, okay, it's time for your husband to come in, we got to check him out.
Yeah. You mentioned something and that was important. You talked about STDs. Now, most people would never think that would cause someone to be infertile, because guess what? There are some STDs that are what's the word I'm looking for? They're only detected when you have some sort of test.
Right. Average, you can't trace them.
You can't trace it. It's undetectable.
Yeah.
Right? Unless you actually go in and have some sort of blood work done. So that's definitely key. So I'm sorry, go ahead, continue. Like I like to, get
down to it. Yeah. And I talk about I talk about that in the book. I talked about that in high school, which was not high school, in college. It was a very transparent moment for me in my book, because you'll automatically assume, because I did have an STD in college. And I was like, oh my gosh, you mean that idiot that gave me that could have possibly caused me not to have kids with my husband? Yeah. And I was just,
Yes.
Found myself being very upset.
I'm learning some stuff too. And it was just like, really? Okay. I didn't know this. So that's why I'm glad we're having you on, to shed some light on this topic, because I really, really think it's important, because 9 times out of 10, when you talk about infertility, I know from women, they start pointing the finger. It's you. Your sperm count is low.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. And so that took me through a whirlwind in and of itself, because you can get into a place of shame and guilt because of your careless days back in the day, And although you might not attribute it to you, but you can't help if somebody's cheating on you, right? And so now you're blaming somebody else, like you could have possibly, that was like the second question my gynecologist asked me. She was like, okay, well, you're good here. She's like, have you ever had an STD or something? And you're right there and you're like, well, yeah, I did.
Right. Well, listen, at least you knew, so you knew how to direct that conversation and next step on her end. Because if you didn't know, if a woman doesn't know, then you have to go through all the different, check off points.
Right. Okay? Exactly. And that's exactly what it is. It's like a full checklist. And unfortunately, when we think of infertility, although it's like, it could be 1/3 male, 1/3 female, but it's 2/3, and we as society, we automatically assume that it is the female. That's the first thing that we kind of navigate towards, where, well, let me check your eggs. And, all women are like, it might be me, but it takes 2 to tango. Right. And so we both have to be conscious and aware and make sure that we get ourselves checked out. Right.
So you said 9 times out of 10 it's the female. I was thinking 9 times out of 10 it was the male.
No, I said 9 times out of 10 they think it's the female.
Okay. Because I'm like, really? Okay. All right.
No, they think it's
I'm
the
listening
female.
to the expert. Okay. So I'm taking notes. Okay.
No, people just assume that it is. I mean, if you take it back to the Bible, it was always the woman was barren. They never said the male was barren. And
that's right.
So it's a stigma thing. We always think it's the women, and men kind of negate, going, because my husband, he's a trooper. I absolutely love him. But when I ask him, and it's in the book, so we're all full and transparent now. But when I asked him originally, I was like, maybe you should get checked. And he's like, I'm a grown, healtly man that works out. I ain't shooting no blanks. And it was so arrogant.
All that bass in his voice, right?
Right. Right. And I'm like, well, that's a bit prideful and arrogant. That would mean that it's possibly me, Right. And so that's one of the things that we talk about in the book, is that we just assume that it's always the female We both need to be getting checked, male and female.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So now you came back with your slate clean. What was that conversation like with your husband? How did you approach him to say, well, hun, this is what my GYN said. So
Look, that was that straight conversation right there. Cause I was like, sir, they said I'm fine. And she wrote you out a referral for you to go get a sperm analysis test. And that's when he was like, sperm analysis test? I ain't around here shooting up blanks,
Right.
okay.
And I'm okay, fine. As a male, let me not, push the subject. And I think I waited like another year after that.
Wow.
And my
Okay.
thing with that was allowing that person to come to themselves.
Okay.
Right. Because in a marriage, we got to work together.
Right.
And I could see that my husband was uncomfortable with the
Okay.
conversation. And
Okay.
so my thing was, and being a praying woman, that God had to work something out with my husband. Right.
Yes.
Because there had to be a submission level there, because you can't be like, ain't nothing wrong with me, when you don't know if there's
Right.
something wrong,
That's right.
with, but if I'm pushing it and I'm pushing it and I'm pushing it, I can then be a nag. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna let God handle this. And I remember my husband came home one day and he threw his bag down. It might have been a year and a half later. He was like, I'm going to get tested. And I was like, okay, what changed your mind? I had a conversation with God, I'm like, okay.
So on his own, he decided, listen, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And within that year, no one brought that conversation up. No one brought the subject up.
Very gracefully, because this is a very sensitive walk. And my gynecologist told me that off bat. She was like, this is where couples can tend to get into some discord, because you'll start doing the blame game.
Yeah.
And so she was like, just be patient with each other in this, and be sensitive to how each other feels. So we do check-ins, right? So I got to check in with him to make sure he's good. And I had a conversation to make sure that he checks in with me if my cycle comes and I didn't make it, that, we weren't successful this month, and just checking in with me mentally and spiritually, like, how are you handling it, in this season, until we decide what is the route, for us, particularly in this journey. And so that was just a check-in, right? We would just check in. And if I see it's a little tense, then I would just kind of back off. And I think that really attributes to my spirituality with God, right? Because God is always in control. He's sovereign. So I'm like, okay, God, that's your child. So you deal with your child. And he did in his timing, right? So
Let me ask you. So while you are in the season of waiting, right? What were you doing with your body? Like in terms of preparation, right? What were you doing in the season of, as you said, over a year waiting?
Yeah.
What were you doing? Because I know from the research that I did, but infertility, also a part of it has to be with our diet as women, as females. So what were you doing for yourself within that season?
Yeah. So I think for me, I knew that your eating was a part of it, right? Just making sure, but not for everybody, right? Because I'm a hardcore, I work out a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so some people would be like, okay, well, don't work out as much. So that's when all the advice starts to come. But for me, I'm not even gonna lie, I really had to go in the presence of God for my direction, right?
Yeah.
And start to strip down little things that can help with your sweets, you know what I mean? And I've never been a big drinker, but I started to add more greenery into my diet and make sure that I was getting exercise. But also, which is very important that we might not be aware of, is monitoring your ovulation, because sometimes we don't even know that we're ovulating.
That's
I like to when I teach my younger girls at church, because we have to have these conversations, I call it the slip. And they're like, what's the slip? I was like, that's when you have that clear mucus that comes, that means you're ovulating, right? And so of course for them it's like, don't have sex, of course. But for us, we have to be mindful, okay, well, I'm ovulating. Or I think the important thing is also getting predictor kits, right? And so you got to know what your body is doing, because we don't necessarily know. It's like sometimes you cramp when your cycle comes, sometimes you don't, right? Sometimes the day, it's a 28-day cycle. Sometimes you didn't eat something, or you went on a fast and now it becomes a 25-day cycle. So it's early or it's 2 days late. And so for me, I had to monitor some things. One of the things that God told me I had to lighten up on are starches. And that was just my own personal thing. Like I started to dismantle things things for myself. Like, okay, well, I'm eating a lot of this and a lot of that, and I got to my healthiest. But again, I'm a dancer, so I'm always pretty active. So I was like, well, I feel like I eat pretty good and I'm always exercising. But one of the things that they tell you is to be mindful of when you're ovulating, right? Know
Yes.
when you're ovulating, because literally you have a 12-hour chance like to
Wow.
get pregnant. Like it's a 12-hour window, you know, and if the sperm go swim and stay, then boom, you might get it. But if that sperm is like, no, not today, just gonna die off, you know, it might not make it until, you know, that 12-hour window, depending when you're having intercourse, right? And so for me, I think everybody is different. They might tell you, you know, a friend of mine got their a DNA test, right? So they could know the things that their body was allergic to. So my husband did that test as well. So that, you know, he finds out, oh, I can't eat broccoli, or I'm not supposed to eat avocado, or, you know, so I think it's different for everybody. And in some cases it works. And in some cases it still don't work. You like, okay, well, I didn't strip everything from my diet and we still ain't getting pregnant. You know what I mean? So it's very like, it's kind of convoluted in a little bit, in a little way, because everybody has the advice, but everybody's advice is different for every person because we're all made differently. So what works for one person and their diet and their exercise really might not work for me, right? So
Definitely.
yeah.
Can you imagine all this stuff to conceive? And this is why they say, you know, we are all winners, because the journey that this poor sperm has to take. They're like, you got to make it happen because you are a winner. You were able to get fertilized, you know.
Yeah.
So that's something amazing. Like, you know, so many people would have given up.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
What keeps you? I guess the fact that you guys know that you want a family, you have a burning desire to be parents, is actually what keeps you, you know, hopeful. Is that, you know, is that it?
Yeah, I think when you look at who or what your purpose is, right? I think someone had to really break it down to me in a sense to where I mean, we're godparents to so many kids, right? And so I think the hardest time is like, why everybody else want me to be their godmama? Not why we can't have our own, right? But it just really attests to how special you are as a person and just the purpose and the promises of God in your life. And I know with teaching kids and all of that, I have this one mom say, Dacía, if y'all never have kids, you've impacted so many kids throughout this entire world, like just traveling, that you have done your part, you know? And I think what keeps us hopeful is always the promises of God, right? Because it's as simple as God is sovereign. It's like what you said, it's a miracle. Like to be alive is a miracle. For the sperm to reach an egg and us to come into fruition is a miracle. Whether it is natural, whether it is IUI, or whether it is IVF, God still has the last say, right? Because you have people who've done 10 IVF or 10 IUI cycles, you know, and for those that don't know what that is, IUI is like artificial insemination, where they, you know, take the sperm and put it up, you know, into your uterus. And then IVF is when they take the sperm and the egg and they create an embryo, you know, they, you know, fume it together and then put it back into you. And so that could still not work. People spend thousands and thousands of dollars to do those procedures as well, and it's still not happen. So at the end of the day, it's still God. It's still an overseer who has the right to say yay or nay. Right. And so I think with anything in any waiting season, whatever that waiting season, we got to learn how to wait well, because everything happens in due season. Even if you decide to adopt, do you get what I mean? That still has to be something that God says, okay, whether, you know, somebody decides to give up their child or, you know, you go with an adoption agency, somebody still has to say yes from the heavens. Right.
Absolutely. But you know what, is I wanted to segue into what you said about the different procedures and the different steps that folks take in terms of being in conception. Can you speak in terms of that, in terms of, you know, the expense that many of, you know, that route, that if you take that, the expense, and if you have any suggestions for anyone that may be in that predicament right now?
Yeah. Okay. So I could only speak for us, you know, because everybody's insurances are different.
That's right.
And then, you know, the interesting thing is I heard this pastor say, it's interesting, no shade to anybody, that insurances cover some abortions, but they do not cover conceptions, which is really ironic, right? You know, we're okay with taking it out, right? But what about bringing them in? Like insurances really don't cover these types of procedures of just
Yes.
bringing life into fruition. And so depending on what the diagnosis is, they'll let you know, or the prognosis, they'll let you know, okay, well, we recommend IUI or we recommend IVF. Of course, IVF is more expensive. That can
Yes.
start at like the $20,000,
Yes. Yes.
like
Yeah.
literally it is a move. Like you have to a strategic move. I
But
remember
why is it? I don't mean to cut you off, Dacia, but why is it so expensive? I've never understood. Why is it so expensive to do these procedures? I don't get it.
well, you asking the wrong person because I think it's all racketeering.
Yeah.
It's just I mean, like, why we paid it so this much for a root canal or a
Yeah.
cavity? I mean, to get contacts. I mean, to get glasses. It's just everything in these types of fields to me just are expensive all in all. And maybe it's that they're housing eggs or that it's like a surgery, and I think surgeries are just expensive in general. I haven't had any surgeries, thank God, so I really don't know, what they cost, but from my family members having them, they tend to be expensive as well. So this is another type of surgery,
Yeah.
and then artificial insemination can be something that from 5 to 1,000 per cycle, right? That's
Yeah.
20,000 per cycle that you
Mm.
do. Right. And so like I was telling Roxanne earlier, I can't get nobody advice on that because
Right.
I don't know where your pockets are. I don't know how desperate you are, to bring seed into the world. I can only say for me, myself, and that I'm gonna go with God. Right. And so if he want to drop 20K in my pocket for me to do an IVF cycle, then go ahead and drop the 20K.
Yeah. Of course.
You got your sign, right?
What you say?
I said, and then you would have gotten your sign that yes, that's what you need to do. That's the
Right. Because I always think just in everything, there's this scripture, y'all, that I really love. And it says, all his ways are pleasant ways and his paths are paths of peace. Right. So for me in this journey, I can only go with God's peace, because if I'm not in God's peace, that means that I'm in anxiety, and God is not a God of anxiety. He is a God of peace. Right. And so if when they recommended IVF, I got up because it was a virtual appointment. I got up and ran to the bathroom and started crying immediately, which means I'm not in peace with that at the moment. It's invasive, right? And it doesn't mean that it's not the right move for somebody else, or even that it's not the right move for us. It just means it's not the right time for me. Either I haven't gotten the knowledge or the understanding of it, or just the intellect for it to sit and me be okay with it. But if it makes me anxious, then I can't go with it because I'm no longer going with my peace, right? And so that's really how I recommend. And the only thing that I can recommend for people that are making these types of decisions, you got to go with your peace, period. And if you're okay with spending that money, if you're okay with getting that surgery, if you're okay, like my last doctor said, because we had to get a second opinion, right?
Yes, I was about to ask that too.
Yeah, we just got a second opinion recently, and she was like, even with IUI, Dacía, as long as you know you're going in with these expectations, you got to be okay, right? Go in knowing this is the probability.
Right.
This is what it is, that it can or cannot happen. If you can go in and just have that understanding and that knowing, you can't walk out disappointed. Right. And so I think that it's very, very mindful that we just prepare our minds for certain things and then just go with your peace. Go with your peace.
You can spend a whole bunch of money on that, like you said, Dacía, and nothing happens. And the average person might be saying, well, if I'm going to spend all this money, something needs to happen. But the probability is so small.
They're so low. Yeah, I think they gave us even like 20 to 30% still. Because my mom was like, y'all, I can help y'all pay. And I said, well, it's 20,000. She said, how much y'all need? How much you need? I said, 20,000. You got it? And she said, I was being funny with her. I was like, you got it? And her eyes got big. She said, like, the whole thing you want me to pay? I said, well, you ask. It's 20K. And then she was like, well, oh God. I said, that's an expensive grandbaby, huh?
It's a lot. I mean,
but there are organizations now that's helping couples out with some of the overhead costs. Do you know of any organizations?
Yeah. I don't particularly know any organizations offhand. I do know that people do grants. I know that people do GoFundMe.
Yes.
And I think that's how comfortable you are, right? With letting that information out, because I can't see myself crowdfunding for one. That's just me.
Yeah.
But other people are, and they're in that space where they're very free. I think within the past, since I wrote my book, have I truly been free with talking about infertility, let alone go and ask people, for money. But there are organizations for sure that are able to give grants to families, again, but that's a process as well, right? Because
Yes.
somebody still has to have the say that we approve this couple, or, and then it depends on what you're getting paid, right? Just like a student loan, right? It's depend on what they think your overhead looks like and whether or not you can afford it, so I still think there's several measures that you have to take to even walk into that aspect, but to each his own, but they are available.
Absolutely. Let's talk about your book. As I was reading, you said
Mhm.
your book is a like you have to help yourself. It's not like a self-help book. You have to do the work, right?
Yeah.
And I want you to talk about that a little bit in terms of what inspired you to write the book,
Uh-huh.
and has it been cathartic?
Um,
Cathartic, excuse me.
yeah, absolutely. It's a freeing aspect. Just in general, something as simple as talking about the STD is freeing, right?
Yeah.
Because you can be walking in shame of that from like 15, 20 years ago, however, but you just never told anybody that this. And so you have people being like, oh, what? Ah! And my doctor looked at me like, girl, this happened all the time. Everybody, their mama got them, and so it is freeing to be able to put yourself in a position to just be a blessing to other people, right? Because if
Yes.
you're able to talk about taboo subjects, I mean, how freeing is it for somebody to call you and be like, girl, this is me in a book. Thank you for sharing. Like, that's what the book is for me. So I was telling Roxanne earlier, my book is journalistic, right? And so for these 6-7 years of this journey, I had 3 books of journals where I was just having conversations with God, especially as a believer. You're walking and believing in God. And so you get kind of like dismantled in a way, or disheveled in a way, you're like, God, how can you allow this to happen, to me, these trials and these circumstances. And as I started to write, these journals and get an idea of myself, because you're only lifting a mirror up to yourself to be like, dang, is this really what I'm thinking right now? Is this really how I'm feeling right now? And I'm like, how can this help somebody else? And so I started to compile all of my journals and creating this book called The Game of Life. And I say it as the game of life because what is the game that we're all playing? It's the waiting game. We're all going to play the waiting game in life. Either you waiting for a bus, you waiting for a check to come. We all doing some type of waiting. And so I wrote The Game of Life, and it's releasing the weight, the WEIGHT, the heaviness, when God says wait, WAIT, like not now. And there are some weights that we deal with in waiting seasons, and just learning how to wait well. Because one thing that I can say that has been therapeutic coming out of this is, like, I've learned how to wait well. I've learned how to wait patiently on God and the timing of things, because there is kairos, there's perfect timing for things. I
Yes.
can't imagine God giving me a child 6 years ago. I now that where I am now, I can't imagine, just the maturity level now versus then, or even the selflessness that I'm learning now versus when I first got married. I'm still me, myself, and I,
Yeah.
And so there's seasons that happen, and I just encourage everybody through my book to wait well, because God is the God of perfect timing, period. But that doesn't mean you sit and don't do anything. You still get checked, you still do your
That's
due
right.
diligence, you still, he might be like, go, yes, I want you to do that operation, or yes, I want you to do that. But at the end of the day, it's still a waiting, because he's still gonna say yes or no, or wait.
Yes.
Those are only 3 that he has: yes, no, or wait.
That's it.
Absolutely. That's it. That's it.
So, I mean,
So
so let's play devil's advocate here. So
Uh-oh.
if
Dun,
it
dun,
never,
dun.
well, listen, because it's always pros and cons to everything. And no, we wish you well in your journey in a successful conception. Say
Yeah.
it happens, right? And I
yes.
know you're a faith believer, and you believe that He will guide and direct your path and what's right for you. And like you mentioned
Yeah.
if it doesn't happen, you would have been a blessing to someone, right?
Mhm.
Because someone needs to hear your journey. Someone needs to be inspired by your message, right? And we were all created to deliver a message, whatever the message is. And everything that you want is not always going to work out the way in which you want it to.
Absolutely.
So, if it doesn't happen, then what?
Mm.
Um, I've already asked myself this question, right? Because I feel like in my prayer time or even in my book, I talk about that moment where I had to ask myself, if this doesn't happen, or here it is. So I was in my prayer and God literally, I felt the Holy Spirit talking to me. If I never give you this, will you
Mm.
still serve me?
Got it.
That was the hardest question I could ever answer. And it
Mhm.
took me some months to answer that question because I really had to go back and say, what is the purpose for you being on here in this earth? Right? Is it just to get married and to have kids? No, it's to spread the gospel. It's to be a blessing to other people whether you are my seed or somebody else's seed. And that is a process, right? Because we can't say that we're all in a place to where if God doesn't give us, our wildest dream, the thing that we are just like, God, this, I want this, will you still serve him? Like, who wants to answer that question? Because I was mad at God, you know what I mean? Like, really, I had to be like, well, I don't know. Let me think about that for a second, because this is my perception of my reality. This is what I see for my life and what I've created in my head. But then there's nothing compared to what God has for you, right? Because all the people that'll be freed at just the platform of just sharing, hey, this might not have happened for you, but did something else happen for you? Did God have a different plan for you? Because we all want his plan, right? And so I
Yes.
think for me, I'm okay with, as long as I'm with my master, my savior, that is walking with me and giving me direction on who to touch, who to pray for, who to give a word to. Although there's something about having that desire, right? Because God
Yes.
says that I will give you your heart's desires, but who gave you those desires? God gave you those desires. So for me, I don't feel like he'd ever give me a desire that he won't bring to pass. Period. If that's the case, I feel like he'd take that desire from me and get me into a place where I'm okay. And that might be what he's doing, right? Like he can get to you a place where you're in a place of peace with or without kids, right? But that
Yes.
still takes time because I'm now taking what I envision and I'm reframing it to what God is envisioning for me. And then that's still me killing my flesh to my own desires, and letting them manifest into his desires. And I feel like, oh, that's when the transformation has, when it's no longer about us and it's about him. So then you become okay with what it is because he's already shown you who and what you are to him. So
Your belief level is so, up there, that I can't believe that he would not give his child, one of his children, what you desire so earnestly for. You-
yeah.
You're serving him and you are being a blessing to someone else, to many women out there, who have walked this path. And,
Yes.
like you and I had discussed earlier, um, I have three girls.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband, when I met my husband, he didn't have any kids. And I didn't want to have any children after I had my two children with a prior relationship. And so my husband and I, he wanted two kids. And I was like, God, let it be twins because I do not want to get pregnant twice.
That part.
So it never happened. I had one single child. So he has one daughter. So some
Mm.
Right.
years went on by and he started nagging me again about, listen, I want a son. I want a son. I'm like, oh Lord, here we go again.
Yeah.
So not for nothing, but we had gone down because we had, we've been married now, I think about, I want to say 9 years, 8 to 9 years at this particular juncture.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not nine, probably about 7 or 8, I should say. And he's contemplating, oh, I want to have a son. So it's like, listen, I am not trying to go down that road again, but my husband he is. Let's see what happens, okay?
Yeah.
And lo and behold, we was not conceiving. So I was like, well, let's go and see what's going on. So lo and behold, when we had gone down to the infertility doctor and they told us all, the options, yada yada. And I went and got tested first. My husband went to the nephrologist and we're going and everything is, and it came back that my left fallopian tube was blocked.
Mm.
Mm.
And it was like, really? So in my head, I'm like, okay, so the left is blocked. So what's going on with the
With the
right?
right, huh?
Right.
It only take one.
It only takes one side. We don't need the both. And I don't know. I think we just kind of dropped the ball because it wasn't so much of a pressing issue for me. But I
Mm-hmm.
really relate to some of what you were saying because here it is. I'm like, well, damn, you mean I'm like barren? I can't have kids. Like, and I don't. We really didn't do a thorough, detail as to why I was not able to conceive on the right time.
Mm-hmm.
Because clearly, my right tube is viable.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So, I just say that because I could certainly relate to, this conversation and how that can feel, even though
Yeah.
I've already had kids,
Yeah.
to be with someone who wants children and you can't give that person what they want, you
Yeah,
really start questioning yourself. It
Oh
really
yeah.
absolutely.
like
And
Yeah.
your purpose, what is life really about? If God talks about being fruitful and multiplying, why you can't bring seed on the earth. I don't know about you, Dacia, but it was even though I had kids already, right? You could still have that same feeling like, well, what's the purpose?
Yeah.
What then? Because things like this can ruin marriages.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
You talked about the blame game. You
Yeah.
understand? And clearly, sometimes you have people when they've been trying to conceive for so long and they can't conceive, they split up because one
yeah.
like,
Mm-hmm.
is a huge expense.
It
It-
is
It's a huge expense, and you definitely
Yes.
have to be in a financial position to take
to
that on. Now,
absolutely.
tried several cycles and it doesn't work, and then you guys start bickering, and then you separate, and then the other person winds up meeting someone else, and then they conceive.
It
What?
happens all the time. It
All the
happens all the
time.
time.
Yes.
And so I wanted to ask Deja, not to cut you off, Roxanne, but I wanted to ask Deja about that because you spoke about you know, your you spoke about your relationship with God. And
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you about that for couples that are struggling because your faith and it shows here that it's so strong.
Mhm.
But how is that with your husband? Is the path the same? And I don't know if you can answer that or not. But like Roxanne said, this is a topic that really splits couples.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you guys have those conversations? Or how do you know how he's truly feeling? You know?
Well, men are difficult in general, right?
Yes.
Because women, we talk about it. We have conversations,
Yes.
even if it's with your best friends. Oh my gosh, we got to talk about the rules of engagement of that part because that is another part, the conversation part, right? The
Yes.
actual talking about it. But regarding uh the what's the word I'm looking for? The being comfortable talking to your best friend as a female, like that comes natural for us. Like,
Right.
sis, let me tell you what's going on, just to kind of get off your chest. But men don't necessarily talk like that, right? And so I think for my husband, he could internalize a lot of it. And I think for men, it can feel a bit more discouraging to not be able, to conceive, especially in the time frame that you desire. So for most people, like we talked about it, the women tend to be, or we tend to think that it's the woman. But in our particular situation, they had diagnosed my husband with male factor infertility. And so that, of course, was definitely a bummer, you know, and for I have to say for us, because we had suffered a miscarriage about 2 years ago, man, my husband's a trooper.
Mm.
I think what holds us together is our faith because he's
Mm.
just as strong as well, like his conversations are with God, and he's like, okay, well, you give me the wisdom, what should I, to be able to come home and be like, I had a talk with God, I'm going to get
Yes.
tested, right? That attests to his relationship with God. And I think that that's important because sometimes what happens is you'll have people that are just not talking about it,
Yes.
period. And then that's when you get bitter and resentment. And one of the things that I talk about is the book is like, when my husband was delaying going to get checked, I could see that resentment was building, right? Because I had
Mm.
already had what they say is a clean bill, right? A clean health bill. So it's like, bruh, if you don't go get checked, bruh, like, it's been year 3, like, go, like, what, you know what I mean? And so I think it also has to be how you communicate within your marriage, because of course God is the head, but we got a lot of believers who believe in for kids and they don't happen and they still get divorced, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's how you communicate with each other and being honest. Like, I'm feeling this type of way. I'm feeling this type of way. And therapy helps, right? I have a therapist,
Yes.
that
Yes.
I can kind of talk it out with, where she's like, okay, well, you're creating a story in your head, Dacía. You can't create a story in your head, because it's not really true. The narration isn't true, right? And so then you're like, well, sis, well, hold on. But she's being honest about how we start to make assumptions about how the other person feel, what they're thinking, that it's not important to them, but they haven't communicated that to us. They could very well be navigating how they are supposed to get through the situation as well. And so what I did was encourage my husband to get people that he could be transparent with. And I did the same, right? So you don't necessarily have to tell me, but do tell somebody that, this is disappointing, this is discouraging, et cetera, et cetera. But we tend to have conversations and what I call, like we said earlier, check-ins. When we actually have that relationship to where it's made us stronger. This situation has made us stronger, not only in our faith, but even with each other and just communicating. So it's us against the world, with or without kids.
That's a beautiful thing.
All for it. I definitely see that, you guys have a strong bond, a strong relationship, and that's awesome. That your husband is on board and he too has a relationship with God, because it's
Yeah.
so important, especially
Yes.
during time.
So important.
Awesome conversation. I loved it. I mean, I can go on because I'm like a sponge. I love to learn different things.
Yes.
And you definitely were engaging. If nothing else, I'm definitely going to support the book. So
Thank you.
just give another plug to the book if you don't mind, Dacía. We'll go ahead and wrap it up.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I actually have it here, so y'all will see you and talk. I'll show it and talk about it. So, the
Okay.
book is called "The Game of Life: Releasing the Weight When God Says Wait," and it is our particular story, or what I like to call just a waiting season, because you don't have to necessarily be going through fertility struggles to relate to the book, because we all have different waiting seasons, right? And so, it's really, really, really a good read. Like, I'm not even lying because I'm the author, but I heard I'm a little funny, y'all, just a little
Right.
bit.
And
So
just a
I
little
added
bit.
just a little bit, right? So I add a little comedic vibe in there, and that's where we're talking about just the rules of engagement that's in there. And so what it also does is just teaches us how to have conscious conversations, so we're not going around here asking people questions like, when you having kids? Well,
Oh,
ma'am,
yes.
I had a miscarriage yesterday. How many of you not, read the room? You know what I mean? Don't ask
Right.
me my age, Hey, when you having kids? Haven't had it. Y'all have kids yet? How old are you? 38. Oh, what you waiting on, sis? Nope,
Yes.
that's not the question.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so,
We
yeah, when
need
you
that
get
book.
married,
Yes.
And so what I do is, for people that even are struggling with fertility, or even if you're in a waiting season, I say, buy the book and then tell them to turn straight to the rules of engagement, and then they'll stop asking you those questions, right?
Yes.
So I just encourage everybody to buy it. It's available where books are sold: Amazon, Walmart, Barnes and Noble. And then you can follow me on Instagram at Dacia James, Dacia James, probably on all platforms. It's the same thing.
Awesome. Awesome.
What a phenomenal conversation. I love your spirit, Dacía. I mean, you could be one of my girlfriends in my head. We could just be chopping it up, right?
Yeah, we
Yes.
are, man. I look forward to
Yes.
coming back. Y'all are cool. Y'all are fun. I love it.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for this amazing conversation. Like, when Roxanne and I spoke about talking about this particular episode, I wasn't knowledgeable, but you provided a great perspective, a faithful perspective. And I really want to thank you.
That.
Yeah, Dacia, for that. And I actually have a special announcement. Listen, if you guys are listening to, all right, that's what we do here, Dacia. That's what we do.
Okay.
Yes, I am going to, Roxanne and I, we are going to give one lucky viewer a free book. So if you're listening to our voice, yes, we got you. Listen, this book is amazing. The seeds that you're planting is beautiful. And we just want to thank you. Yes, we just want to thank you so much for your transparency. Certainly.
Thank you.
I definitely think we could have gone on a little bit more, but of course, due to time, we are going to cut it short. But I thank you that you have blessed some listener out there, some viewer out there.
I appreciate y'all.
And of course, we are definitely going to support the book and give one of our lucky subscribers the book. So guys, chopping it up with R&K. Don't forget to check us out on all social media platforms. Like us, share, view, comment. We definitely read the comments, and we're always interested to keeping you guys engaged. So until next time, chopping it up from your girl R&K. Dacía, we want to thank you once again. Don't be a stranger. Feel free to come back on and discuss your many different venues that you have going on. So
Absolutely.
so much, guys. It's been
Thank you.
a pleasure. Have a fabulous evening on purpose.
That's right. Bye, guys. Thank you.